All right, Larry Kruger here from the Pig and a Pickle Crew Show with a little 49er video. The latest on Brandon Aiyuk is it seems like things are starting to move along a little bit on the Brandon Aiyuk contract negotiation front. I thought Mike Silver really wrapped things up with a tweet that I read that he put out a couple days ago. But just now I was listening to Jeremy Fowler on ESPN, who basically says that the Niners and Aiyuk are still talking, that talks are intensifying, and that they're not close. So, I think it's very likely that Aiyuk wants, probably north of $30 million, maybe 31, 32 million. I bet you the 49ers are sitting there in the mid 20s, 25, 26 million. And there's a big gap there as far as AAV and what we're talking about on a contract. So, things I don't doubt are intense. I mean, Aiyuk's camp really, wants to get a deal done, I'm sure, and yet they don't really have any leverage here. And the 49ers, it sounds like, are considering any and all options. And any and all options came down to maybe trading for Justin Jefferson, potentially letting Aiyuk play on the franchise tag this year, and just saying we're not giving in. Silver came out with a tweet the other day that I thought was so right on. He said a very short version of where things stand with the 49ers and their receivers. And he's like, one, they drafted Ricky Pearsall in the first round. He's a big part of the present and the future. All right, so that there's no doubt about that. And Pearsall, Purdy to Pearsall in minicamp and OTAs is becoming a thing. I mean, there's no question that Pearsall and Purdy are getting more in sync the more reps they do on the practice field. So there's no question. Now, was Pearsall drafted to replace Debo or Aiyuk, or maybe eventually, but I don't think he was drafted with the idea that he would replace them this year. But that undoubtedly is true. Number two, according to Silver, he says if Aiyuk ends up taking the 49ers' best offer, Debo will be gone after 2024. I don't think there's any question about that. I agree with that too, that if by chance the 49ers and Aiyuk can work something out, the Niners have already extended JJ, and then will have extended Aiyuk, and then still have Brock Purdy's contract looming. Yeah, in that situation, at the end of this year, I think it's highly likely that Debo Samuel winds up gone. Probably traded, maybe cut, but I would say traded for anything between a third and a fifth round pick. That would be my guess at the end of this year, and maybe more if he plays better than that, if he plays, has a big year this year. And then Silver says three, if Aiyuk doesn't take their best offer and presumably plays on the fifth-year option this year at $14.1 million, he says it's Hunger Games between him and Debo to see who stays beyond 2024. Yeah, so if the Niners say, hey, you know what, we're not going to give you a new deal, sit there and play on the franchise tag, and that's it. We're sticking close to our budget, and we're not going to budge, and you can play this year. Then I agree with Silver on that as well. Then it's, let's see what kind of year. It's just rolling things into next year and basically saying, okay, if Aiyuk has a monster year, they probably sign Aiyuk at the end of the year. If Debo has some monster year, maybe they sign Debo at the end of the year. But they most likely can't sign both. And so then it becomes this battle royale between Debo and Aiyuk to see who has a better season. And from a Niner perspective, think about that for a second. Is that all bad? If Debo and Aiyuk are playing, incredible football each, trying to outdo one another, so they can potentially earn that big money long-term contract from the team that drafted them. That's not all bad. Competition is not always, sometimes is a very, very good thing. Now, if it got contentious, it would be bad. But if it didn't get contentious, that might be a real good possibility. And then Silver writes, number 4, there's still a chance Aiyuk or Debo could be traded between now and the November trade deadline if the offer's good enough and or if things have developed or devolved with Aiyuk. Yeah, so if Aiyuk is really, really unhappy and they're holding him against his will and he becomes an island unto himself, yeah, I could see things going south with that, with him, and them saying, hey, let's get him out of the room and trading him in November, especially if Pearsall and Cowing and Debo and the other receivers are performing. Then there's also the chance that, a receiver goes down around the league. That's the thing. I mean, you never know who's going to go down and how a team's going to react. What if a team that is a Super Bowl contender loses a receiver and says, hey, we'll trade our late first-round pick for Debo Samuel, who's off to a good start? What if Pittsburgh, looking there with Pickens, says, hey, you know what? We think we can go to the playoffs this year with Russell Wilson, but we need more than just George Pickens. We'll give you our first-round pick, which we think is going to be a late first-round pick for Debo Samuel. And even if it wasn't a first, let's say a team would be willing to throw a couple picks with a second being in there. I could see the 49ers, if Aiyuk's playing well and the rest of the receivers are playing well, I could see them moving on from Debo in the middle of the year. And additionally, if Debo were playing great and Cowing and Pearsall were playing great, the offense was humming, and Aiyuk was upset and very, very divisive in the locker room, I could see them trading Aiyuk as well. So I definitely think, as Silver lays it out here, they drafted Pearsall in the first round. He's part of their present. He's part of their future. And then if they do wind up signing Aiyuk, there's almost 99.9% sure that Debo's gone at the end of this year. And then 3, if Aiyuk doesn't take their best offer, then he's and plays on that 5th-year option. Then it's like a battle royale between him and Debo to see who has the better year, to see who potentially earns the long-term contract. Maybe both earn it, maybe neither, but odds are, I should say maybe one or the other earns it, maybe neither earns it. Odds are it won't be both. And then number 4, there's still a chance that Aiyuk or Debo could be traded between now and the November deadline. I think this is a fluid situation with 2 talented guys, with now a loaded 49er receiving core. You still have lots of receiver questions around the NFL. Who's the Raiders receivers? Who's the Charger receivers after getting rid of Mike Williams and Keenan Allen? Are they really going to lean on Ladd McConkey? Who are the Patriots receivers under Drake May? What's going to happen with T. Higgins in Cincinnati? What's going to happen with Cortland Sutton in Denver? There very well could be a team or two that gets very serious about trading for a wide receiver and might be willing to give you a first-round pick or a second and a package deal for one of your receivers between now and the November trade deadline. So that's viable. So that's it. That's the full breakdown. But the latest from, I thought Silver with a great tweet. And Silver's really good at covering the Niners because he's got this thing down. And I agree with every aspect of his tweet. And then, of course, Jeremy Fowler with the headliner to launch the whole video, which is that, the Niners and Aiyuk are talking about a contract extension. I think we knew that, but that talks are intensifying and that the two sides remain not close on a deal. So what does that mean? Do things get contentious? Do we see a holdout? The only thing that Aiyuk can do to put any pressure on the 49ers is to hold out. And yet, at the end of the day, because of the way the rules are stated and because of, the way the 49ers can just tag him and control him, that the 49ers retain all the leverage. So does this get done? I don't think the Niners are going to budge. I don't think this is going to be one of those deals where, it's a real favorable deal to Aiyuk. I think the 49ers are going to negotiate very, very hard. And yet, it's like if you could lose but win, but you could win but lose. And I talked about this with the coach earlier today. It's like you could win the negotiation with Aiyuk and then have him there, on playing on the 5th-year option, let's say, and you didn't give in on the contract, and so technically you won, but he might be in a terrible mindset and not in that Super Bowl mindset that you want him to be in, and so you won the battle but lost the war. Or you could sign him to you could give in to him and sign him to some monster contract, and looks like you've settled this thing, and then he could play terribly and be not worth the contract. So, there's all kinds of different permutations of how this could potentially go. But as you heard from me at the start here, Jeremy Fowler on ESPN just said talks between the Niners and Aiyuk have intensified, and we'll see where it goes from here, if we get some resolution to this in the coming days, or if it goes all the way to August. I think it's probably in everybody's best interest to not have this drag into late in August in the preseason and near the regular season, like what we saw a year ago with Nick Bosa. All right, thanks for supporting The Krug Show. Thanks to Pig in a Pickle for being the title sponsor of The Krug Show. Thanks to Underdog Fantasy for sponsoring this video. Check that link in the description. Use the promo code KRUG, KRUEG, and they'll match you up to your first $100. And thanks to all you guys for supporting The Krug Show on YouTube.